Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series in economics. This particular video lecture is pretty specialized in that it particularly relates to the lecture I'm having on November 22nd, 2017, as it's the day before the Thanksgiving holiday. I know that many of my students will probably leave early for the holiday season and miss the lecture. So, being the nice guy that I am, I decided to record a video for those students so they didn't miss out on any material just because they thought it more important to spend time with their family than to listen to me talk about game theory on the day before the Thanksgiving holiday. So, having said that, we can move forward here. So, some of the things I'm going to be talking about in this lecture and upcoming lectures is the make sure our students understand the difference between static games and repeated dynamic games. Static games are only played once and they act simultaneously, so they have no information about how other players will act when they make their decisions. So that makes it very much different than a repeated dynamic game. Uh, if a static game is repeated over many periods, you may use more complex strategies that occur in a static one period game because you might want to influence the reactions or the strategies of your opponent in future iterations of the game. Sequential dynamic games, if one acts before the other, so it's in sequence, so realize that this is much like the price leadership or the quantity leadership model that we talked about previously, and oligopoly. So realize that there's a fundamental difference with that situation than the previous situations that we talked about. Also, we'll talk a little bit about auctions, and bidders have not all the necessary information about the value that other bidders place on an item or service. And then we'll talk a little bit about behavioral game theory, because some people have a tendency to make decisions based on psychological factors than using any type of rational strategy. So some of the terms that we're going to be using, game theory. So this is used by economists and others, in particular, as it has underlined there, to analyze decision making by players who use strategies. So the purpose of this is to look at decision making and looking at the strategies that the different players might use during the process of the game. A game is any competition, and also that there's strategic behavior involved in the process of playing the particular game. And a strategy is, as it has underlined here, a battle plan. So these are the different actions that you will take conditional on the information available to you, i.e. what your opponent has done previously. If you have hunches about what your opponent might be doing, or if you've identified some type of pattern in their behavior, you will base your battle plan based upon the conditional information that you have available to you. And lastly, an action is any move that a player can make. So, for example, you can enter or exit a market, you can set price, you can set output, etc. And lastly, we have payoffs. What are the players going to receive from the game's outcome? What kind of profit are they going to have? How much income? Are they going to get utility? Are they going to spend years in jail, etc.? And lastly, the rules of the game. These are the regulations. So, for example, timing, when each player moves, the different types of actions that are allowable in different stages of the game, and other aspects of how the game is actually played. Also, we use some phrases, common knowledge, any piece of information known by everybody, so all the participants in the game know this. And complete information is a situation where strategies and the payoffs are all common knowledge to all players that are playing a particular game. So a static game, we're going to be looking at that, and I want you to realize that we're going to look at static games and then we're going to make it a little more complex. So we're going to start off with some fairly easy game theory and move on to some more complex ones. So the players act once, all at once, and they act at the same time. So there's only one, this is only going to occur one time, and the players are going to make their decisions or implement their strategies at the same time. So I want you to realize here, this is going to be what is referred to as a payoff matrix. So as you can see here, we have the players. We have American Airlines and United Airlines. So those are the two players that are involved in this particular game. We have the strategies for each. For example, American can set output at 64,000 seats per quarter or 48,000 seats per quarter. The same holds for United. So we have the players and their strategies, and the payoff matrix here has the payoffs associated with that. So it tells us what American and United make given the four different outcomes that can occur because each have two strategies. So if we want to make a determination of which one has a dominant strategy, usually what I tell students to do is to, for example, pick one strategy, for example, here for one of the players. So we're going to pick the number of seats supplied at 64,000 per quarter, and we're going to ignore all the other information related to that. So we don't care when American sets their output at 48,000 per quarter. And what we want to know is, given that American is setting this output at that level at 64,000 per quarter, what is the best strategy for United? Which one gives them higher profits? Well, they can set output at 48,000 per quarter and have a profit level of 3.8 million, or they can set their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, which gives them a profit of 4.1 million. So obviously, if American is going to pick a high output of 64,000 seats per quarter, United will also pick a output of 64,000 seats per quarter. So conditional upon American's output of 64,000 per quarter, United is going to select 64,000 seats per quarter. Now we have to do the same thing for the other pricing option for American. So I'm getting rid of, eliminating the 64,000 seats per quarter for American and only concerning myself with the 48,000 seats per quarter. So if that's the case, conditional upon American setting output at 48,000 seats per quarter, what is American better off doing? Are they better off setting output at 48,000 seats per quarter and getting profits of 4.6 million? Or are they better off setting profits at 64,000 seats per quarter and having profits of 5.1 million? So obviously they're better off, again, with setting output at the high level of 64,000. So that is a dominant strategy for United because they're better off setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, regardless of what American does, whether American sets their output at 48,000 seats per quarter or 64,000 seats per quarter. United is always better off setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter. Now we could do the same thing for American and decide what is going to be their best strategy. So if United sets their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, what is American better off doing? They're better off setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter because they will make $5.1 million in profit, whereas they will make only $4.6 million in profit if they set their output at 48,000 seats per quarter when United sets their output at 48,000 seats per quarter. We can look at the alternate strategy here, where United is setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter. What strategy is best for American? Again, their best strategy is to set their output at 64,000 seats per quarter because when they do so, their profits are equal to 4.1 million, whereas if they set their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, their profits would only be equal to 3.8 million. So they have a dominant strategy. They are always better off setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, irrespective of which of the two strategies that United opts for. So those are the two dominant strategies. Let's see why they are dominant strategies. And as you can see here, if we get to this point here where both firms are setting output at 64,000 seats per quarter, United has no incentive to lower its output because in lowering its output, it's going to lower its profits. And the same thing holds for American. All right, American has no incentive to deviate from 64,000 seats per quarter when United has 64,000 seats per quarter because in lowering its output, it's going to lower its profits. Therefore, we see that this is going to be the dominant strategy. Also, realize that there's a prisoner's dilemma going on here, because what we see here is the outcome where both firms set output at $48,000. Industry profits are equal to $9.2 million. So industry profits are maximized here, but that is not the Nash equilibrium. That is what is referred to as the prisoner's dilemma, that the Nash equilibrium is an equilibrium where industry profits are not being maximized. So let's take a look and make this a little more complicated, where we have three different levels of output, and we have the same airline. So we have two players, American and United. We have three strategies each. Okay, a quantity of 96,000 per quarter, a quantity of 64,000 per quarter, and a quantity of 48,000 per quarter. So now, because there's three strategies and two players, now we have a payoff matrix with nine specific payoffs that we have to take a look at here. So let's take a look at what's the best for United if American sets output at 96,000 seats. Obviously, this is going to be a quantity of 48,000 seats, because that will give them a profit of 2.3 million, which is better than 2 million for 64,000 seats, and it's better than 0 for 96,000 seats. Okay, we'll do this for another strategy of American. The quantity is equal to 64,000. So what is going to be the best option for American? Well, if they set their, the best output for United. So if American has 64,000 seats per quarter, what is the best strategy for United? Well, at a output of 48,000 seats per quarter, their profits will be 3.8 million. If they set their output at if United sets their output at 64,000, their profits will be 4.1 million. And if they set their output at 96,000 per quarter, their profits will be equal to 3.1. So if American sets their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, the best response by United is to set their output at 64,000 seats per quarter. And now we'll look at the last strategy here. What if American sets their output low at 48,000 seats per quarter? What is United better off doing? At 48,000 seats per quarter, they make 4.6 million. At 64,000 seats per quarter, they make 5.1 million. And at 96,000 seats per quarter, they make 4.6. So obviously, if American sets their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, United is better off setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter. And we can go through this for American to make that determination of what their best strategy is. So taking a look at these portions of the payoff matrix, if United sets their output at 96,000 seats per quarter, American's better off setting their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, because their profits will be 2.3 million versus 2 million versus nothing for quantities of 64,000 and 96,000 per quarter. Now we look to see if United sets their output at 64, what's the best strategy for American? Again, it's going to be 64,000 seats per quarter. They have the highest level of profits, 4.1, which is greater than 3.8 when they set their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, and it's greater than 3.1 when they set their output at 96,000 seats per quarter. So that's the best strategy given for American, given that United has selected an output of 64,000 seats per quarter. And lastly, what if United sets their output at the lowest level, it's 48,000 seats per quarter. American's best response is to set their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, because their profits will be equal to 5.1 million, which is greater than the 4.6 they would have made in profits if they had set their output at 96,000 or 48,000. So with all those underlined, you can see what the best strategies are. And if we take a look, let's say we happen to be at this point right here. Let's say for some reason both of the firms are setting output at 96,000 seats per quarter. Does either party have an incentive to deviate from that? They both have an incentive to deviate from that. If American has 96,000 seats per quarter, United has a benefit by restricting the number of seats to 48,000 because their profits would increase from nothing. They'd have zero economic profits to 2.3 million in economic profits for that particular route. Does American have an incentive to deviate from that? Yes, it does, because if it were to set its output equal to 48,000, their profits would equal 2.3 million versus nothing when United sets their output at 96. So we've moved from this point here to this point here as the new situation, that both firms are setting their output at 48,000 seats per quarter. Taking a look at this, do these parties have any incentive to deviate from that? Yes, they do. Because if both firms are setting their output at 48,000 seats per quarter, United is going to benefit by increasing their output to 64,000 seats per quarter because they're going to see an increase in their profits to 5.1 million. Does American have the same incentive? Yes, it does. So both have an incentive to increase their output to 64,000 seats per quarter. If we take a look at this, does either party have an incentive to deviate? No, because at this 4.1 million, if American increases their output, their profits fall. And if that decreases their availability of seats, their profits fall. Same thing holds for United. So American will not deviate from the 64,000 situation because raising or lowering the number of seats that they sell for this particular route is going to decrease profits. And the same thing holds for United. If they increase their output to 96,000 seats per quarter, their profits are going to fall to 3.1 million. And if they lower the number of seats available, they have fewer flights between two particular cities, their profits will fall from 4.1 million to 3.8. So at this point here of United setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter and American setting their output at 64,000 seats per quarter, there's no incentive to deviate. Therefore, this is going to, be the Nash equilibrium. Also realize that there's what we just talked about are pure strategies. Each player chooses an action with certainty. You can get involved in situations where you have a mixed strategy, where you pick strategies based upon a probability of doing so. So for example, it might be a 30% chance of setting prices high, a 20% of chance setting it medium, and a 50% chance setting it low. All right. So that is what is meant by a mixed strategy. There's a probability associated with the potential strategies that you are selecting. So here is an example of an entry game where there's entry or do not enter or do not you enter or do not enter into a specific market. So we have two different firms. They are the players. The strategies are do not enter and enter. And the payoff matrix outlines the four potential payoff areas for these two firms, given that there are two firms and two different strategies. So if we take a look, that there's actually two Nash equilibria in this game. If you take a look, if for example, firm 2 does not enter and firm 1 does enter, neither party has an incentive to deviate from that. For example, if firm enters, if firm 2 does not enter and firm 1 does enter, there's no incentive for firm 2 to then enter into the marketplace because they will get negative profits. They will start losing money. Whereas firm 1 will not want to deviate from that strategy because when this occurs, that they enter, the other firm does not enter, they make $1 million worth of profit, and if they did not enter, they would have made no profit. So the same thing holds here for firm 2. So as you can see here, there's no dominant strategies, but there are two Nash equilibrium that can occur. So I want you to be aware of that it's possible to have multiple Nash equilibria in a game. So that leads into using the mixed strategy. So the mixed strategy here is, and it's very simply, it's just 50% do not enter, 50% enter for both of the firms. And when you get these types of probabilities, now you have to calculate what's the expected value of this particular occurrence. So realize that there's a 50% chance that this firm is going to do this, and there's a 50% chance of firm 2 doing that. So this particular outcome has a 25% chance of occurring, and this outcome has a 50% chance of occurring. Same thing for if firm 1 picks enter, that there's a 50% chance of firm picking enter, and there's a 50% chance of firm 2 picking not enter, do not enter. So the probabilities of these occurring are 0.25 and 0.25. So to calculate the expected profit, it's just going to be the probabilities. You multiply the probability of the occurrence times the profit and adding those together. So for example, we have 0.25 multiplied by 0, 1 million multiplied by 0.25, 0 multiplied by 0.25, and negative 1 million multiplied by 0.25. So they cancel each other out. So they are equal to 0. They are equal to negative 0.25 and 0.25. So firm's expected profit is equal to 0. Now the purpose of the mixed strategy is that if you're going to engage in a mixed strategy, what you want to do is assign probabilities to your strategies that make your opponent indifferent. Basically, that whatever strategies they pick, they're identical to one another. So the expected outcomes are the same across all of their strategies. So that's the key thing here. The strategy is set up so that your opponent will be indifferent between entering and not entering. So you're assigning a probability that makes them indifferent between their strategies. So that's what you do. There's the probability of entering, probability of the other probability, 1 minus the probability of entering. So the two outcomes here, to make them equivalent to one another, is when the probability is equal to 50% in this particular scenario. Now that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes your probabilities are going to be different from that. And let me give you an example for this. All right, so here we have a scenario where there is no Nash equilibrium in this particular marketplace. So there's not going to be any pure strategies because there's no dominant strategies, there's no Nash equilibrium, etc. So how are we going to approach this? We're going to approach this that this person, Mimi, is going to set up her probabilities of supporting Jeff and not supporting Jeff so that the outcome, look for work versus not do anything and lay around and be a layabout, are going to be equivalent to one another. So basically what Mimi wants to do is to select the probability of support and non-support, which will make the payoffs for Jeff equivalent for looking for work or laying around and doing nothing. So let's take a look at how we want to do this. So we're going to say, well, we don't know what P is, right? We don't know what the probability, that's what we want to solve for. What's the probability of support that Mimi can give to Jeff or show to Jeff that will make him indifferent between looking for work and laying around. So we know we're going to assign the probability of support as P, and since there's only two outcomes, no support, that the probability of support and no support is going to be equal to 1. They're the only two outcomes. So that's what we do. So for Jeff, looking for work, he knows that with a probability of P, he is going to get 2 units of support from Mimi. So it's P times 2. So we have 2 times P to show this potential part of the payoff matrix. Then we go down to here where Mimi is not going to show any support, and he is going to have a profit of equal to 1, so it's 1 times 1 minus P. Then we want that to be equivalent to the expected outcome of looking for work is going to be equivalent to the outcome of loafing. So if Mimi gives support and Jeff loafs, he's going to have an outcome, a profit of equal to 4. So loafing, the outcome of loafing is going to be 4 times P, and then it's going to be equal to the other outcome that could potentially have when he's loafing of no support. So we have a probability of 1 minus P multiplied by the payoff for that. So we can multiply that through and solve for P, and we end up with a probability of 1/3. So for example, if Mimi supports Jeff 1/3 of the time and provides no support 2/3 of the time, the outcome for Jeff is that look for work and loafing, those two outcomes are equivalent to one another.